So I guess the place to start, when cloud arrived on the scene, there were sort of dire predictions for the channel. It was, obsolete, no longer required. That hasn't quite materialized, but is the channel nonetheless still fighting a bit of a rearguard action, or not? I mean, what's your thoughts?
Well, I guess it is in a way. I think like everything, you've got to evolve with the technology and the changing wave of customer requirements. Obviously, if you look back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, or a historic channel view, then there was a lot of hardware, software centric sales. You got a distributor, and they were aggregating all stock from elsewhere, and it was a very different salesperson, and that's what the customer wanted to buy. They want to buy some service, some storage, some equipment, some professional services. And the big change, obviously, is you've got the hyperscalers. Don't need to name them all, but Microsoft Azure being a really common one for our channel partners, where and customers asking to go to Azure, and therefore obviously a lot of traditional modes and models and stuff's changed. So I think there is some big opportunities for channels, and if you're stuck as a hardware vendor selling storage or servers, then I think you are fighting a rearguard action if you've not evolved. I think that's fair enough to say. There are still opportunities, I'm sure, but your kind of pool, becomes smaller, but then maybe so does your competition. So I think it'll depend on if you look at a broad channel, if it had stayed exactly the same as it was, then yeah, it would have been a struggle. But I think you've just got to move with the times for the opportunities and make sure that you're serving your customers for their needs, really.
You mentioned the idea of them being an aggregator in the days of hardware software. I guess they are still that, but as you say, the hardware software side may be dwindling, but there are lots of offerings, cloud managed services, which they can then hand on to their customers. So the sort of hybrid IT world seems to be where we're at. So somebody needs to explain that or help the end users work out their ideal infrastructure platform, using a mixture of resources, I guess. And also, if it's not too much to throw in the same question, the pandemic changed the way we all work, and again, hybrid seems to be the word of the day. So we're all mixing and matching now, it seems, remote and office-based work. So I guess my question at the end of all that is, the channel best placed or has a great opportunity to bring together this hybrid world and to help end users understand and implement it?
Yes. I think the whole the structure of the channel, and effectively you've got a bunch of IT organizations doing lots of different variable things. It could be a managed service provider around Azure, it could be someone looking after kind of user support, service desk, providing laptops and doing more homework in. I think the underlying thing is that it's important for the channel to kind of understand their customer base and listen to the requirements, and you'll have you need to be the organization that makes that connection between the customer needs and the requirements, whether that be hybrid working or modernization of applications, or whatever that requirement is for your customer base. And that's your secret sauce, to understand your customers and to be that link with the very complex world that's created. So like you say, from a hybrid perspective, we've seen obviously a massive shift in working patterns, which has brought through loads of different new technologies, and alongside that, there's been a massive shift on kind of data center and application modernization. So it's a fantastic opportunity at the moment, because we've got this huge wave of change caused by external and internal factors, and you've got customers trying to catch up with that. So the benefit of being in the channel is that you get to see these issues and opportunities and solutions to problems across a scope of customers. It's always like, if you're supporting a range of customers, you're going to have you've got more chance of seeing the problem before in another customer, and you build up that knowledge. So you've got a very different kind of skill set and knowledge base to what you can have if you're an end user. You've not got that across customer view. If you know, it's very difficult to see those problems and opportunities and share and be that creator of knowledge across customers. So I think that every customer's got their own challenge. Hybrid is definitely the right way to describe how we need to deliver complicated customer solutions, whether that be hybrid workplaces or hybrid computing. But yeah, that trusted advisor model, I think, is so important, and it's the most relevant it ever has been. Now everything's moving and changing. That's when you need the support, to support your customers and guide them in the right direction.
In terms of some of the specific opportunities, technology-wise or solutions-wise, one of the more interesting ones I've seen recently, some of the big hardware manufacturers are perhaps aware that they can no longer sell these units direct to the customers, but they're offering a sort of service model whereby I think they are shipping servers, storage, whatever it is, to the customer's site, and then the customer is in essence leasing it back, and potentially someone either has to build the data center in which they're hosted and or manage that scenario. Is that something you've begun to see happening, or is it still early days?
I've got a question mark over it, if I'm honest. My personal view, and maybe not the view of my employer or whoever, is that it's a pivot to try and compete with the hyperscaler platforms and try and stay relevant. At the end of the day, there's probably more spend on computing and infrastructure and services than there ever has been. It's just been that spend is filtering through the big hyperscaler platforms and people that are getting it right from a cloud perspective. Now, there will be obviously an appetite depending on the company. Everything's moved to more operational budgets and costs. Now, if you're an MSP, traditionally, that's not something that you like in your business. You like to invest a load of capital. The board are focused on EBITDA, and if you've got a load of depreciated asset, then that's a bonus. If you have to then lease something yourself, then that's not necessarily building. From a, it's just a nature of kind of private equity and the IT industry that EBITDA value is such an important thing, and obviously that makes things skews the model some. But I think from a general customer appetite, where we've got a customer, they like to stay nimble. I think that's the only thing I would say. They still probably would have to sign up to a longer term contract, but get it as an operational cost. The big benefit of that model is a lot of the vendors have kind of pre-prepared capacity that the customer's not necessarily paying for, that they can tap into. So that offers some level of agility and flexibility. So it will depend on the use case. I personally feel that where maybe there's going to be more benefit around that computing bit is where you're moving where you're getting that maturity in the cloud platforms. Take Azure as a great example, whereby a lot of the new software and technologies and stuff that Microsoft releases on Azure. You can't necessarily, if you're running SQL Server, you can't get, historically, a lot of Azure SQL stuff would have been released and you can't necessarily get that back internally. So the big change that's happening really is that software is now starting to filter down into the customer's on-prem data centers. So you've got things like Azure Arc and Azure Stack HCI, where you can actually take the PaaS services. You can take, Azure SQL got GA'd 4-6 weeks ago, so you can actually now start running those technologies. So I think what you'll see is that I'm probably answering more questions than you've asked here, but I think from that hardware rental operational model, you're still buying tin that you still need to bake something on yourself, but you're still buying something. I think maybe the future is more where that software layer from the hyperscalers is coming into the data center, and the systems that enable you to keep that modernization. So you've got consistency with what you're running in the cloud, what you're running in your data center at software level is going to be probably more prevalent, more important. If that makes sense.
And if there is a sort of super hype technology in the moment, I suspect it might be 5G might sort of sign up to that role. And related to that to a certain extent is the whole idea of the edge, which potentially isn't new because we've always had this sort of centralized, distributed computing sort of cycle. But what do you see happening right now? As I go, some people I talk to suggest there's a lot of 5G infrastructure out there. It's just not getting used because there isn't the right devices yet. Other people saying, there isn't much infrastructure, and the only place 5G is getting used is inside a building or a factory, and it's not getting. Any thoughts on that 5G landscape?
Yeah, personally, I've not got a massive background in that networking 5G space. I think where we're seeing customers more kind of like do their forward planning and thinking is how they open up some of those endpoints to more analytics type edge workloads. So I think one of the big blockers is that you've got a lot of devices or you need quick kind of iterative kind of AI action at the edge rather than gathering data, sending it up to a cloud platform through some link, running some algorithms and then getting the result back. It makes a lot more sense to get and use the connectivity as well as the edge capability to make some of those decisions quicker, closer to where you actually need to take that action. And I think that's part of Microsoft's strategy as well, to kind of bring that technology closer to the edge for use cases like that. And I think 5G comes into that as well, because the better kind of like connection you can get to some of that cloud platform, the faster the connection. It just opens up more possibilities that you can do at the edge with the right devices and the right software as well to drive that richer experience.
You mentioned AI there, then that's another, I guess, huge. It's a pretty amorphous term, I guess. It covers a lot of areas. Do you see any particular bits of AI? I mean, I'm thinking you got the machine learning, you got IoT, which potentially is quite busy at the moment. You've got augmented virtual reality, blockchain even, I suppose, comes in. Any sort of insights as to what customers are or aren't doing with any of this stuff?
Yeah, I think at the moment it's that we've got quite a few customers dealing with it. I think probably AI gets, maybe machine learning is a better terminology of kind of the common usage we see. So I think the typical customer at the moment, typical Node4 customer, would be in the middle of a project whereby they're trying to sort their data structure out. So we've got loads of disparate databases, Oracle, SQL, MySQL, all these different data stores on-prem, in the cloud. And I think the main mode that we've got customers doing at the moment is that they're trying to centralize that data and prep it into a data warehouse platform in Azure or other cloud platforms are available, where you've got that tooling already baked in, so you can do machine learning, you can do that predictive analysis. So the main mode is really, you have a project whereby you do all the ingestion of data into a newly kind of defined data warehouse. You've then running your analytics off that kind of prepped and trained data model, so you got all the reporting, but then you're also using some of the technology to train the data and build predictive algorithms and machine learning. And that's really where we see that kind of project, that feeds back into reporting and decision making. I think that's the main thread that we're seeing from customer projects at the moment, where it's about cracking open the data that they've got and putting it in a place where they've got nice set of tools that are easy to use and to actually drive some of that machine learning and predictive analysis.
Okay, and perhaps the final big tech, which is I guess as old as IT itself, is our good friend cybersecurity. The hybrid working model has maybe posed a few fresh challenges, but I'm wondering, there's two things. There's clearly lots of different cybersecurity approaches, solutions, terminologies out there, and there's also, I think there's a bit of an ongoing issue with who owns it, particularly in this sort of channel model, I guess, because the vendors, if you like, are more than happy to sell solutions, and then either the channel has to stand behind them to a certain extent, and or the end user thinks the channel is doing it, and maybe the channel thinks, well, I've sold this cyber security solution to the customer, it's his responsibility or her responsibility. So yeah, two things are going on, I suppose. So the technology solutions and ownership of the issue, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What my personal view was the customer, and whoever is the board of that customer owns cybersecurity for their data. I mean, I've owned a company in the past. If you're not accepting that responsibility and you think it can be deferred, then you'll find yourself in a big problem. I think what you can do obviously is put in place your own. You've got to identify the risk. You've got to put in place, in place the mitigations, and you will have third parties that will deliver mitigations and services and that to help you minimize the risk. And within that, there'll be a contract that sets obligations and services that the service provider, so if you've got an SLA for a SIEM service and a SOC service, and you're delivering that as a provider to the right scope and the SLA, then that's your responsibility for delivering that service. I think the end user always needs to own at some level. They can buy services to help that mitigation and go through there. I think certainly from I think it's a lot more complex. You've got loads of different things happening at the same time. You've got workers all over the place. You've got SD-WAN implementations going in that then have created a much better, you've got internet connections everywhere, where beforehand it was nice and simple. Everyone came out through one connection. You put some firewall in, you did all that perimeter security, web content, you contained it. People came in the office, the laptop was locked down. But now you're in cloud platforms, you're in a load of services that people are building in that they've not got a clue how to use or how to secure. People seem to think there's a load of security magic when you move to the cloud. They forget responsibilities. And I think that it's quite a massively changing landscape, whereby beforehand customers had security pinned down pretty well when things were controlled. Now I think that it's easy for customers to say that they're moving to a certified cloud platform that gives them a long list of accreditations, but then start building on it and don't have the knowledge to secure it properly, which is where the channel comes in for sure, in terms of those best practices. But there's going to be a really strong governance model around making sure that all these third parties that are building stuff, accessing things are controlled. So obviously there's a whole suite of services and technologies and stuff that can support that. But ultimately, I think customers, there are some customers, but a wide ranging group of customers are so focused on the modernization, so kind of looking at the business outcomes for driving new applications, and that is that even though they wouldn't admit it because security is vitally important, there's a lot of focus on the cost of operating applications, and security is quite expensive if you do it properly. That's the reality, and there are risks there that maybe they don't want to kind of look in the eye.
Talking of sort of risks and looking things in the eye, sustainability, perhaps not the most obvious thing to connect with IT, but we're all aware with COP26 coming along, and there seems to be a sort of seismic shift to do with all environmental issues and the responsibility of industries, etc. I'm wondering two things. Firstly, yourselves as an organization, are you finding increasingly customers are asking whether it's how your data centers are run, etc., about that sustainability, but also themselves, are they wanting you to provide, I don't quite know how you characterize it, but more sustainable IT solutions, or is it too early in the piece for that to be expected?
Yeah, I think it's all. I think at some level that ethical, that kind of responsible provider, requirement has always been there for customers in different fashions. I think certainly, going back to security, I think, I know it's not obviously part of that, but there's an expectation from customers that when you sell things, they're secure, they're best practice, there's that, and sustainability is moving into that expectation as well, definitely. I think it's absolutely key around the kind of the more environmental side. I think more so actually we get a lot of more pressure from vendors. I think they, the bigger, like Microsoft, for example, we were on a call with them yesterday around sustainability. They are keeping their partners honest as well around that agenda, and because it's important to them and their customers. And I think it's a maturity thing within providers that you do you do end up adopting culturally, because from a company, you know, from a cultural company, as it becomes more prevalent for you as an individual to care more about the environment, to care more about equality and diversity and things like that, then that kind of mirrors how you want to be in a company that reflects your values. So I think from my perspective, although it's massively important for customers, or of growing importance, I mean, I don't think we'll have anyone that opts us out because we're not ticking all the boxes. I think from an employee perspective, actually it's more prevalent that an employee may choose to join you or not join you based on some of those kind of the way that you look at sustainability as a company. So I think it's more at the moment more important culturally for the company to change and properly adopt that kind of sustainable culture, which drives better retention, buy-in from employees, and actually makes you feel like you're working for a company that's more progressive and not stuck in the dark ages.
Because we covered a fair amount of ground, so to try to maybe bring all the strands together, if you're a channel organization right now, do you have any thoughts, advice as to how you assemble a set of solutions? I mean, do you specialize in one technology? Do you try and link a few together? And also, not just assembling a portfolio, I guess, of solutions, but also what are the things that potentially would give you an advantage over, you know, other folks offering them, or, you know, if you're competing with some of the hyperscalers in certain stuff, what are the sort of extras that you can bring to customers?
Yeah, so I think you've got to look at the market, and because everything is moving to more a kind of as a service model, you know, moving to cloud platforms, the market as a majority is filtering down on a handful of providers. You've got your Microsoft, Google, Azure. So if the market is not like before, where you've got a list of, you know, 10, 20, 100 the vendors that you end up working with is a much smaller demographic, and they're taking more and more ownership around that kind of old kind of stomping ground for MSPs and channel. So I think you have to think about it. So in the past, you would have thought maybe about investing in assets and you know, buying software and kind of flipping that into a service. I think the assets moving forward is people and skills and capabilities. And I think that's you know, that kind of more service model in terms of professional services, delivering consultancy and managed services. I think that's where you've got to start. You might need technology to deliver some of those managed services. But the main thing is really listening to your customers, because you only get that differentiation in the market if you listen to a customer, you find out their problems, you solve their problems, you make them happy, and then you see if that's a repeatable problem that works across your customer base. And I think you can be, I think you've got to be specialist for your customers. So whether you're, you know, looking at, I don't know, a specific set of ISVs, or you're working in healthcare or public sector, or maybe you're across the span, I think the best advice is to try and focus on a group of customers with common requirements and just become a specialist at that, and ultimately build your services so you're showing them the value of the people, you're giving them the skills that they can't employ internally, you're doing things that they don't want to do internally. At the end of the day, your customers got their own business to run, whether that's running trains, whether it's building software. You know, you've got to take away, or you've got to show them that you can deliver IT better than they can do it themselves. And that's a challenge, because you need the better processes, better people, and a better cost model for delivering that than they can do it themselves. Otherwise, the customer will just go and do it themselves, you know, and they'll build their own team. If they can do it cheaper and better than you can, then you've not got very far to go, have you? So I think that's the main aim. So.
Okay, and maybe just to finish with Node4 yourselves, if you can give us just a flavour of how you work with partners, you know, channel and stuff like that, and what sort of you think is unique, differentiates yourselves in what's, you know, in certain areas certainly quite a competitive market.
Yeah, I think Node4 is evolving really rapidly, and part of our challenge is that everyone just knows us as a data center provider, and I think that's where we've historically worked with partners. So partners, you know, have a customer, they build a solution for a customer. It needs a data center, it needs some infrastructure, a network, and that's been quite mutually, you know, a nice fit with partners that they can then go and do the last mile and deliver it to the customer. I think Node4 we made a few acquisitions. We acquired the Nav people recently, so we've now got an end-to-end kind of Microsoft play, you know, covering everything from 365, Azure, the hybrid estate with HCI and Azure Stack, you know, Power BI, Business Central Nav. You know, we've got SQL Server. We've got this massive, broad set of people and skill sets. So the evolution for Node4 now is that our asset is not the data centers, it's the people and the skills. So the way that we work with channel partners really depends on the kind of, you know, we're almost like a bit of a menu that they can pick off and build their services. You know, we can help them fill a gap in a specific area, or they can just, you know, buy, you know, consultancy services, or we can manage stuff. So good examples are managing database solutions for them. So a lot of channel partners struggle with holding like really good data skills. So, you know, we work with a lot of channel partners around delivering Oracle, SQL, Azure SQL kind of support, so they can add that skill set on the kind of base infrastructure. We can host and run hybrid Azure platforms for them in our data center and across Azure, and then let the customers build on that. So the new HCI Arc kind of environment's a really good example of that. But you know, we still have that data center and network. So that's our big differentiator when you look at us compared with a kind of public cloud hyperscale provider. But on the reverse, you know, we've kind of really got a good set. So the partners that we work with is really vast. So it can anyone from an ISV, whereby they're building software, they want that data skill, they want that Azure skill, you know, they want some hybrid elements, and they just want to build their application. Or it could be someone that's specializing in public sector, and they're happy to build a lot of the infrastructure and deliver that Azure piece themselves, but they just need some specific skills or to work with a partner to make the end-to-end solution with the customer, which could be around, I don't know, Dynamics, or, you know, wherever the holes are. We're there to kind of fill the holes for partners and make sure that they can deliver the best solution that they can do for the customer.
Okay, well, it's been really enjoyable to chat to you. Got some valuable insights. So Andy, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Lovely, thank you too. I appreciated it. It's been good fun.